Today I'm replacing the rear shock absorbers on my 2007 Chrysler Town & Country. First thing you want to do is jack the vehicle up and remove the rear wheels. You will want to either use two jacks or a jack stand and a jack, because I need to have the vehicle jacked up and also have a jack underneath the rear support where the leaf spring goes, so that I can jack it up a little bit and relieve the pressure off of the shock and the tension off of the leaf spring, so I'm not fighting myself or stripping out any bolts. The top of the shock absorber has an 18mm bolt. The bottom has an 18mm bolt and a nut on the end, so you'll need a wrench to hold the nut or the bolt side so that it doesn't just spin and spin. So I've got my 18mm wrench holding the bolt, and then I can loosen the nut. This takes 3 hands, so use your imagination. Next, you want to jack up the lower support so that you can relieve the tension on this upper bolt so you're not fighting it. You can kind of figure out where the sweet spot is so that it's lined up and there's not tension pulling up or pushing down. Once I've got it level, I should be able to pretty easily remove this bottom bolt. Then I can come up to the top and finish taking this guy loose. See how there's a threaded spot up here? You want to make sure that you line it up so you're not cross-threading anything. It should go in easily. You definitely want to start everything by hand before zipping it in with the impact gun. Here's another shot of this bottom bolt. See how it's kind of wedged up and hard to get loose because I'm fighting against the tension. If I jack up just to the right spot, nice and easy, and this guy will swing out of the way. You're not fighting yourself. This upper bolt has a big washer on it that doesn't slide off and kind of a stem on the end, so it's easier for you to guide it in place. The lower bolt doesn't have a washer or the long end on the stem. You want to make sure that you put the bolts back where they belong. This would thread in either place, but you want the washer on the top. I always compare my new parts to my old parts before installing them, usually before I start the job, so I know that I have the right parts before I get everything torn apart. Also want to make sure there's no hardware to swap over. Some shocks may have sleeves or different washers. These don't have anything, but it's never a bad idea to double check. Next, I will get this guy in place and start the upper bolt. Then I will jack the bottom so that it lines up easily and I can slide the bottom bolt in place. So I started the top bolt all the way. I didn't tighten it because I want this to be loose and easy to maneuver, but I've got it threaded almost all the way in so that I know I'm lined up. Then I will come down to the bottom, and I have this pretty level so that I can pop the bottom bolt in place too. You might have to move the jack up and down so that you're lined up correctly. You also want to make sure that when I took this bolt out, the nut was on the outside. I usually try and put all the hardware back the way that it came. I'm sure it wouldn't make too much of a difference if I put the nut on the inside, but I just like things to go back together the same way. So I have this bottom bolt kind of started but not all the way through yet. I don't have the threads poking through. As tempting as it would be to just grab a hammer and bang it through all the way, that's a great way to damage the threads. Then you would need a new bolt. So instead, I'm going to come over to the jack side and jack it up just a little bit so that I'm good to go. Then I can start the nut by hand and not mess up any threads and zip it down with the gun. Then I can zip this top bolt tight and come down here, counter hold the wrench so the bolt doesn't spin. Tighten everything down. Another benefit to tightening it down with the jack under the suspension like this is you want to tighten it kind of like you would have the body weight on, so you're not tightening it down under stress or under strain. So when we jack this up, it mimics what it would be like to have the wheel back on. So that's basically how you replace the rear shocks. We will do this on the other side and put the wheels back on. If you're not certain about tightening them with the jack underneath the vehicle, you can tighten this lower bolt with the wheel back on. Just sneak back under, loosen and retorque, and make sure that nothing's binding. You want to make sure when you put the wheel back on that you've got it on the hub. It would be easy enough to tighten the lugs without it centered on the hub correctly, but then your wheel could loosen up. You could have all sorts of issues. So basically what I do, I get it where I need it. I use my foot to counter hold. This wheel has the stupid hubcaps that the lug nuts go through, so I've got to put the hubcap on before the lug nuts. This hubcap has a little divot here for the valve stem, so make sure everything comes back together the way that it came apart. Once you get the wheels back together and the van on the ground, you want to torque the lug nuts. If you Google lug nut torque, you can come up with a chart that'll tell you the specific torque for your vehicle. This one is 110 foot-pounds, so I've got my torque wrench set to 110. I torque them, do it in a star pattern, not around in a circle, because it's easier to get the wheel cocked if you don't go across in a star. Then I'm going to test drive the vehicle and torque it again. I always like to double check and make sure nothing's loose. If you don't have a torque wrench and you're doing your work at home, I would stop by your local gas station and have them double check so you don't have loose wheels. And that's it.